Welcome everyone to episode 22 of the Gulf Coast Poker Podcast. I'm Ben Saxton here with Wild Bill, and we have a special roundtable guest today, Steve Bierman. Gene D, unfortunately, is not with us because he is somewhere in Louisiana with a dead car battery. So our thoughts and prayers are going out to him. We're sure he'll be fine. But Bill, Steve, how y'all doing? And where are you guys? I'm up here in Vermont for a couple more days. Steve, thanks so much for joining us. You're in Vegas, I take it?
I am in New Orleans. Yeah.
You're in New Orleans. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And thanks for having me. Wonderful to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And Bill, Metairie?
Yes, I'm in Metairie right now, and I'm looking forward to, I guess it's August 28th. We're going to be in Coshada, and we're going to have an event, the Seven Clans Poker Cup Series, and I think that's going to be a lot of fun and hopefully even a little bit bigger than we had last time. So, are you folks that haven't got your reservations in? Contact me as soon as possible. I got a poker code for short stays, and there may be just a few more spots available for the best room deal in poker. So
Good stuff.
that's my plug.
Good stuff. So before we introduce our guest for this episode, we're going to do a quick little roundtable, talk about what's happening in the poker world. We are recording this at the beginning of August, so this is going to be a WSOP themed conversation, I think. So why don't we start there? There really was a lot going on at the WSOP. I have a few thoughts, but I was unfortunately having FOMO and sweating the action from across the country. So Bill, Steve, I mean, maybe we should start with you guys. You were not only there, you were participating, you were playing, you were around the action. So I mean, where do you guys want to start?
Well, so this is probably my sixth, maybe seventh summer being out there all summer. And the first thing that pops to my head is this was the hottest summer since I've been going. It was burning up out there. And of course they set records, so that was kind of neat.
Yeah, I can agree.
How did that change your routine? Or I mean, how did you and other people adapt?
Well, it made it difficult to play golf on those days when you weren't playing poker. Had a lot of New Orleans people in town, played a lot of golf, had some good times. But there was one day in particular, played with Anderson, Ireland, Darrell, Guillory, and played in the wind. There were a couple of moments where I was seeing stars. It was so bad. And we were putting the water away, putting the Gatorade away. It was just brutal. So, I mean, it didn't really affect our poker play very much, but sure did make those days off a little bit less enjoyable.
I will say that if you got a parking spot all the way at the other side of the garage, even in the shade of the garage in that heat, there were times where you might get to the elevators of the Horseshoe or Parish or whatever it is with a little bit of a sweat. But for the most part, we try to stay indoors and enjoy the air condition as much as we could, at least when I was there.
No,
Although
you're right.
see it.
It's hard to sweat in Las Vegas, right?
Yeah.
Because it evaporates. Yeah. But there were a couple of times just walking from that distant parking space that you get inside and, oh my God, I'm wet. It's crazy.
Yep. And I saw a picture, Kristen Deerdorf, who is originally from the region, now lives in Vegas full time. The adhesive, her rear view mirror to her windshield had melted and the rear view mirror had fallen off because it was so hot outside. So that's pretty hot.
Oy vey.
Yeah. But in terms of the action,
thankfully this year they had the air conditioning working great at the WSOP. Remember that year when the air conditioning wasn't working so well? It was probably, I think it was the first year.
The first year, right? Yeah, that was obviously a unexpected change from the Rio, right? Which we had to wear, 2 or 3 layers of hoodies to get around that place.
That's right.
There is one notable exception. So they have a new area for the daily deep stacks and the multi-table satellites. And I believe the first of the two floors was really hot. The one above it had a pretty good air conditioned system. And somebody said they're working on a tunnel between a new tunnel between the Horseshoe and Paris near there, and that had something to do with the insulation and keeping that area cool. But that was a little bit hot. But I thought that was just speaking about that room in general. That was a good addition by the WSOP. We've been tipped off last summer. I think all of us were there when our insider said that they were going to use that space. And man, it is crazy how much it's grown. I don't know where they're going to put people after that if they have to grow anymore, because it's crazy.
So in terms of the action build, was there anything that you wanted to highlight? I mean, there's so many storylines from the summer, I feel, with Phil Ivey crushing it, Scott Seiver winning multiple bracelets, Nick Schulman really dominating one of the high rollers, Victor Blom, Isselger, just like coming out of nowhere and final tabling multiple high rollers. Yeah, so for you, was there anything that jumped out when you think about the summer?
So the Scott Seiver story is interesting because I just saw an interview with him, and the only reason he had so much success this summer is his friend was in those high roller fantasy poker drafts. So Seiver went with him just to see how it went, and then on the first draft, I guess they did multiple buy-ins, and so the first round, they drafted him really low, and he was kind of sitting there and getting a little offended by that. And then he offered bets to everybody there that he would win bracelets. They said, no, we don't want to upset you so that you can do that. So nobody would take his bet. And then they did another draft, and they drafted him even lower. And then he said it was just right there in his head. He's like, well, I'm basically going to show those guys. And he went out and played everything, and hence he had all the success. So if he never shows up to that fantasy draft, he probably only plays to 3 to 5 tournaments he normally plays, but because he went there and he got offended, he played so many more and won multiple bracelets. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, isn't it amazing how much like how motivation plays in and what motivates particular players? Because I suppose with someone like Seiver or whoever it might be who has more money than God, like where's your motivation going to come from? So for him, it was just like showing up at this draft. Because yeah, I mean, he's not somebody who's grinding the WSOP events the way that somebody like Phil Hellmuth is. And he there was no lag between his commitment to get in there and results. I mean, he just started like knocking them off immediately, pretty much. I don't even know how many he played, but it was three bracelets, right?
It was either 3 bracelets or 2 final tables. Or 3 final tables in a bracelet. I think you're right, though. I think it was 3 because it was maybe the first time that's been done in a while, right?
Yeah, confirmed. Three bracelets this summer.
Yeah,
bracelets for Seiver. And
so Steve, what motivates you as a player?
Well, the only other summer story I was going to mention, I don't know how it ended up, but that whole Jeremy Becker thing was pretty interesting. Did you follow that?
I did.
Yeah, Becker and Tice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think Becker won, though. Did he not?
Becker did win. I mean, just for folks who aren't familiar, what was that bet between?
So Jeremy Becker is the kind of player that does not use solvers, likes to say he's a feel player. He said he's never looked at a solver. And Tice is apparently one of those analytical solver types. And I think Negreanu started the conversation and got a bet going between the two of them. I don't know what kind of action they had or anything, but Jeremy Becker was crushing all the weeklies in Vegas for a year. Every time you turn around, he was winning a weekly at the win.
And you played with him a bit, right?
Played with him a lot. He's a good kid, but it was not just the weeklies. He was starting to crush he had a good score at the Venetian, I know. I think he had a couple other good scores, but super nice kid. And yeah, I hope he won. I like the kid.
You were rooting for Becker?
What's that?
You were rooting for Becker?
Yeah, because he's a good kid, and I'm not the solver type either. I do have the solver on my cell phone, but I have no idea how to use it. Joe, I was on a plane going to Vegas this summer, and who do I sit next to? Joe the Pro. And Joe the Pro's looking at his solver. I'm saying, let me see that. How do you do it? So right there, I downloaded it, bought it. I spent the stinking $800, and now it's been 4 months. I haven't used it once. I couldn't figure it out. I got back to my place and started trying to play with it and put some simulations, but maybe they'll offer a class on it one day and then I'll start using it. But I'm a bit of a field player too, like Jeremy Becker.
And it is cool. I mean, in a way, this is the summer of the field players, because Scott Seiver, he's sort of infamous for his like live tells, fake tells, getting information off of his opponents based on betting patterns or some kind of gut feeling. And then Phil Ivey obviously is Phil Ivey. So yeah, it was interesting that Becker ended up winning the bet because he lost the least amount of money. And
Is that right?
So the final tally for the summer, it was just straight up whoever won the most, or in the event of what actually happened, whoever lost the least. Becker lost $17,000, $137, and Tice lost 88,800.
Wow.
So to me, this was interesting for everything you just said, Steve, about like how the different player types might find their way through a WSOP summer. But it was also interesting because it gives a window into the summer grind, which both you guys know very well, which is
Yep.
like most of the time, most players lose. And you
So
have
I played-
very talented players, and they both ended up losing five
Yep.
figures.
I played golf today with a guy who was working the floor, good friend of mine. And I said, how's it feel to win more money than 95% of the players that went out to Vegas? I'm just making that number up. I don't know what the number is, but a lot of players lose money going out to Vegas.
Yeah, I mean the tournament grind is crazy. You got all kinds of variants. You take any little sample size, and in a summer, there's a good chance even the best players, Daniel Negreanu, Phil Ivey, people have definitely had losing summers. I do think in the Becker situation, if I recall correctly, he was going to win the bet regardless, and then he was in a tournament where he ended up cashing at the very, very end of the summer, and he had a chance to actually, if he had gone a little bit further, been able to turn a profit on the summer. So, but yeah, Tice, I think, was somehow done, or maybe it was the last day of the deadline and Tice had already busted and Becker was still live. So, he did have a chance to get that summer saver in there, which a lot of people talk about, where they just have a brutal summer and get that one score at the end that makes it okay. But
What do you think the number is? How many people are profitable? What percent?
Well, I've heard this stat that online, not 5% are profitable players, and these are consistent people that play online all the time. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but I would think 5 to 15% would be a safe number to guess on who had a profitable summer. But there's so much weirdness in there, right? Like some people go out for a few days and cash a tournament. Some people, if we're talking about the people out there all summer, I don't know, maybe 10 to 15%. Do you think that's fair? I don't know.
Sounds about right. I don't know that we'll ever get that number exactly.
So me and Steve both did well in the Colossus, and I want to touch on that a little bit, only because it kind of reflects this point. Well, how many people were in that, Steve? 19,300, something like that?
Sounds right.
And Steve ended up like 200 something.
200 something.
And I ended up 300 something. And I got peanuts, and Steve got peanuts, but a little more peanuts.
Yeah, a little bit more.
It's just crazy to think just how hard poker is when you can play a tournament and beat 19,000 people and be down to 300 and really don't have much to show for it.
What was the buy-in? $400?
Yeah, it was 400. So.
I think I made 4,100 or 4,200, something like that.
Yeah.
After that many people, it seems crazy, but
Yeah, in those terms, it's not quite as bad because it's 10 extra buy-in, but still, they did this thing, and this is a good thing to touch on, is this year they paid out, what was it, 15% of every field, and then was it 20%? What was the payouts this year, Steve? 15%?
I actually thought it was lower than 15% this year, no?
No, I think they made all their other tournaments 15%, and then the min cash was 2 extra buy-in, with the exception of the main event and a couple other tournaments. And they took that money from the middle. That's part of the reason the payouts were so bad, finishing 300th or 200 in a Colossus, because they expanded the number of people they paid and they doubled what their buy-in. And instead of taking it off the top, they took it out the middle, which I think a lot of people were upset with.
Very unfortunate for us.
Right. I'm sure if we won it, we might have compared it to previous years and been like, where's the rest of this money? But,
Right.
if it wasn't that way.
Yeah. But after
So
beating
hard to win a poker
18,000
tournament, though.
18,000 and something people, I would think 10, 20 grand would be interesting.
Yeah. I agree. So guys, also speaking about the WSOP, Ben, what were your thoughts on Jonathan Tomeo and the controversy surrounding the heads up with the main event and the solvers, or the whatever was on the laptop? I guess it's not settled that it was necessarily solvers, that he was going to his rail and viewing the laptop during the heads up action of the WSOP.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, this is something we definitely want to talk about. It's probably been the most controversial talking point of the summer. For folks who aren't familiar, main event gets down to heads up between Jonathan Tomeo, who is a pretty long time pro, and Jordan Griff, who is a rec player. And at least a few times during the heads up match, Tomeo, when there was like a break in the action, he scurried over to his rail. And two of those players on his rail were Dominic Nietzsche, who created a solver, I believe, and then Joe McKeon, who was the 2015 main event winner. So extremely smart, talented pros themselves, and they had the laptop up and they were looking at something, and they were basically giving him some guidance in between hands. And so, in terms of my thoughts on it, I have heard a lot of people, and this may just be the keyboard warriors online, calling Tamaya's win tainted, a cheat. I think that's way overblown. I think the language from the WSOP wasn't nearly clear enough about the way solvers should or should not be used during tournaments. So I don't think Tamaya should be penalized in any way, and I don't think he will be. But I think like on a bigger level, this gets to the question of like optics and how does this look to people tuning into ESPN, to people who are thinking about going out for the summer. And I think it looks terrible. I think it's terrible for the game. I think it's going to intimidate, frustrate, alienate recreational players. And I think that hopefully, and there's already been a ton of conversation about this will lead to more to clearer language on the part of the WSOP and operators to start policing this sort of thing, because whether you're a solver lover or not, whether you're a Jeremy Becker or a Landon Tice, like they're not going away, right? This is like technology and tools are not going away, and they're only going to get more sophisticated. So I think what needs to happen, and what seems to be happening, is a conversation about how to responsibly police these things, and what is sort of inbounds and out of bounds. So those are some of my thoughts. What did y'all think about this?
Wasn't he using the solver before they got heads up? I thought it was at the final table he was using it throughout.
Yeah. I mean, there's no reason to think he wouldn't have been. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the big issues, like they were saying, he pretty much snap folded queens.
Well, that's another conversation. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was basically universally agreed to be a pretty huge ICM error.
Yeah.
Wait, ICM error
Yes,
or
yes,
ICM play?
No, a huge mistake in sort of theoretical EV. Like Like there's just no like a lot of pros jumped in and said like this is not a defensible play, even assuming
Okay.
it's the end. Yeah, that's
Okay.
the consensus among the people who have been weighing in and like basically analyzing that spot.
Hmm. I personally don't get all the fuss. I mean, you look at the sidelines, NFL football teams, they're doing analytics in between plays. I don't know that it gives him that much of an edge, but I would imagine next year the WSOP will have some rules where you can't be in the auditorium with a computer or.
So I
Right.
agree. I agree. I don't think it gives him an edge, but I think what's more important is how it looks and how it's perceived and what people are, whether people are likely or less likely to play tournaments where people are going to be retreating to the sidelines to just like run a simulation. I think it's going to turn off like a huge percentage of you can call them recreational players, I guess.
Yeah, there's some rumor. I think maybe it was on Doug Polk's podcast that he interviewed the guy that came in second, Jordan Griff, I think is his name, and he's a rec player, obviously pretty skilled rec player, but I guess he identifies as that, and he said he's given some thought of possibly suing because they do make an announcement about a lack of solvers and help and charts and stuff before every tournament. I think there's some recordings out there for them with them doing that before the main. I seem to recall them doing that, but who really pays attention to the people on the microphone? Um, I don't know. As y'all have mentioned, I think the easy fix is you outlaw computers, phones, whatever, if you want to be on the rail for the main event final table. Um, I think it's a pretty easy fix to do.
Yeah.
Agreed. Agreed.
Speaking of final table, I do want to bring up a couple of things about Tomeo real quick. I was watching my DVR records all the CBS Sports WSOP feeds, and it had I guess it's the $1 million bounty from at the very beginning of the summer. And midway through, who do I spot just standing by himself, just kind of looking at the final table action in his khakis and in his glasses, but the future main event winner, Jonathan Tomeo. And, I'm sitting there watching him on TV. He's not with anybody else. He's not with any of the players. I'm like, I wonder if in his head he's thinking, like, in a month I'm going to be at this table. I'm going to be winning the main event or something. It was kind of cool to see that. And the other thing I want to bring up, which ties us back to that conversation about the profitability of players, is I played with Tomeo in the main event some years ago now. I can't remember when, but he told the table an absurd number. It might have been 8%. It might have been 18%. My memory it might have been 28. Who knows? But I remember the time thinking it was so small that if I were him, I wouldn't play the main event. Saying that number was the percentage that he had of himself. He sold maybe 92% of himself, and he only had maybe 8%. And again, give me a wide latitude on that because it's foggy. But at the time, I was like, I don't know if I would play the main event for that. So I hope to goodness Tomeo had a lot more of himself this year. But if he didn't, that would explain why Joe McKeon and Dominic Nietzsche were having the solvers and all that, because they might have been the guys winning $10 million. And
they looked very interested, didn't they?
Yeah, they might have had a lot of that winnings, So I would, I guess you would push a lot of edges or push a lot of boundaries if that were the case, right? Like, because they're trying to contribute and help. So I don't know if that's a storyline that should be explored more if any of those people are ever interviewed. But I hope and Tomeo was super nice, so I hope that's not the case, and hopefully he had a big chunk of himself. And I haven't heard anybody say a bad thing about him, even as they've criticized the actions. People that know him, nobody's really spoken poorly of him.
I've played with him several times, and he's a nice kid. My takeaway was that he just doesn't speak very much, and I don't think I've seen him smile all the times I play with him until he won the main event.
Yeah.
Just a very quiet kid to himself, you know. I suspect he's one of those brainiacs, pretty analytical, smart, like a lot of those kids are.
Right. That's actually when they were having the conversation, people were kind of like, why are you playing for that? He had a very analytical answer about the percentage that he needed to have of himself and the time somebody cashes the main event and all this kind of stuff and why it was worth his time. And he had put some thought into it. But you know, that right there, I think is pretty unconventional. Like there's probably not many people in the main event with that small percentage of themselves. And
Yeah, I
then
would think the floor would be somewhere around 35%, right? Generally.
I mean, I would think so. You know,
Yeah.
depends. I guess if you're free rolling it, somebody puts you in, you might take less. But yeah.
So the last thing we wanted to mention quickly is something that that has happened in just the last few days as of this recording, and that is that the WSOP has been sold. Caesars Entertainment announced just a couple days ago that they sold it to NSUN Group Inc., a leading investment group and operator of the leading online poker room, GGPoker. So in effect, GGPoker has purchased the WSOP brand for $500 million. So folks have been talking, speculating about what this means for the WSOP, what this means for poker. Do you guys have any thoughts?
I'm curious to know what it means for Jack Effel. Is he gonna be the man forever? He's been the man as long as I can remember.
I think as part of the sale, Caesars properties are going to host the WSOP for the next 10 years. I think that was in
Really?
one of the articles I read. And I would presume Jack is probably, I think he's as high as it goes in the WSOP. And I would be shocked if they replaced him because, I mean, you can't really argue with his results, right? Like,
Right.
but
I
it's
wouldn't
anything's
expect
possible.
I wouldn't expect too many changes, certainly not right away. They've got a good brand and everybody seems pretty happy with it.
So I'm not going to bash GGPoker. Well, I'm going to try not to, but I believe there's discussions when they had the Bren Kenny scandal and Bren was getting people onto GGPoker that he had certain financial incentives and it was suggested by Zamani in his interviews, if I'm recalling correctly, that his kind of role was to expand the high roller part of GGPoker and might have been getting paid to do so and might have had relationships with it. And so there is, I don't know if that's substantiated or not, but there's certainly some question about the ethics of that. And then also, as I've seen online, people have talked about how that a lot of American players play on a VPN and possibly that might be encouraged by GGPoker, even though it's in a gray area, the legalities of it, or maybe they're looking the other way. Again, I don't know if all that is accurate or I've just seen it said. And that concerns me a little bit because you got to wonder if they're willing to play a little loose with some of these rules, how are they going to handle the WSOP? Because the last thing in the world you need is somebody playing a little loose with that product.
So do
Is that
you think GGPoker bought it primarily to get into that online poker space that WSOP is in?
It's a good question. I know for a long time that GGPoker, you know, I'd say maybe since COVID or the last few years, but they've been interested in it and making offers, and this has been probably negotiated and discussed for a long time between those two. I just think that they being a monopoly, I think that's part of it. But I think they'd like to also have the WSOP live tournament. Poker Stars is starting the NAPT, the North American Poker Tour again. And I think there's a desire by the online companies to have a live component to it. And GGPoker just bought the biggest live brand. But you're right. They're going to have WSOP.com and some more, I guess, legal or more legal. I don't know what the term is. Platforms to sell their product on. What have y'all heard about GGPoker? I mean, have y'all heard the same things? You heard good things or bad things?
I mean, they're primarily online. They were primarily online, right?
Yep.
I've never played on their platform, so I don't know.
So yeah, I mean, I've heard some of what you'd said, Bill. And in addition to that, there was some controversy surrounding their they had or have extremely high rake to the point where it might just be impossible to beat some of the games on there, depending on the rake structure. So I've heard kind of a mix of GG. I mean, it's also become kind of the premier place to play. I think it's like consensus is it's eclipsed Poker Stars. And so yeah, I've heard different things. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Steve. What were you gonna say?
Lost the thought.
Okay.
Yeah.
I saw more GG patches out there at the series than any other patch by
I
far.
saw GG patches everywhere. And
Yeah.
I did talk to one guy who had a GG patch. I heard him talk to his neighbor, and he said that he had won some sort of satellite,
Yeah.
and that he had to wear the GG patch. If he wore the GG patch and he won a tournament, he was going to be gifted some money by GGPoker.
Yeah.
I don't know how much was involved, but that has to be why so many people were wearing the patch, right? Because it was everywhere.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I've never seen it before like that.
Well, it's funny. My main event day one, very nice kid, but probably the worst kid at the table was in a GG patch. But like, I didn't know at the time because he had all the poker accessories, the sunglasses, the headphones, and or the earbuds or whatever it was. He looked the part, but a couple orbits in, I was like, uh-oh, this guy. But I think he won his way through GGPoker. But again, the weird thing is, pretty sure it had to be on a VPN because I don't think he was from a state where poker is. I don't even know, is GG even in the states that allow poker?
I
Is
was going to ask you
GG?
that. I don't know.
I
Do you know, Ben?
I believe it's in like the three states.
No, but like the servers and whatnot, are they based?
Oh, I don't know about
country?
the I don't know about the server. I just mean in terms of the legality. I believe they're in like Jersey, right, and in Vegas.
Nevada and Michigan.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And I guess the last thing I'll say is the community, the poker world, whatever you want to call it. In terms of the chatter that I've seen so far, it's been pretty positive. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Patrick Leonard. He's been a big voice on social media. He said GG buying WSOP is one of the one of the best pieces of news I've seen in poker for a long time. He references things like effective marketing, strong sense of security. Daniel Negreanu is a GG ambassador, and so that.
Let me ask you that. Somebody made it sound like that was sarcasm in that thread.
I don't read it that way. Do you?
I didn't read it that way, but then I got down and I didn't know it was sarcasm until you said maybe the guy took a shot at Daniel Negreanu at that point. But then I was reading through it again and I wasn't sure about it because I don't know much about GGPoker. So, but go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go read Patrick Leonard.
I think so. I'm on this tweet and I don't read the initial tweet as sarcasm, but some of the replies I think might be. So Joseph Chung, who's a well-known Vegas-based tournament player, says this is the best news for WSOP ever. Is that sarcasm? Maybe. A little bit lower down, David
Hmm.
O.D. Baker says pumping money into the WSOP is a basic certainty. Feels impossible to be anything but positive. So I don't read any sarcasm in a reply like that.
Right.
I don't know for sure. I think that the jury is very much still out on this, but what I've seen so far has been kind of cautious optimism.
Yeah.
Anything else y'all want to talk about before we introduce our guest?
I think we covered most of the hot items right now.
All right. So in that case, let me just quickly introduce our guest for this episode, Gian Smith. Gian is a New Orleans-based artist. His craft spans several media, including writing, acting, and video production, but he is most notably recognized as a spoken word poet. His poem, "Oh Beautiful Storm," was featured in a preview for season 2 of HBO's Treme. Uh, and he has been really involved in sort of the film and poetry scene in New Orleans. So we talk about all of that and more in this interview. But the other thing about Guion is that he has had a foot in the poker world in New Orleans for quite some time, and most notably, he was a dealer at Harrah's New Orleans around 2015 for a few years, and he has been playing poker for a good part of his life. I had the great pleasure of being an extra in one of his short films that that involves poker. I'll just sort of leave it at that. We talk about that in the interview. So really very wide ranging conversation. We really enjoyed it. We really appreciate it. So with that said, here is our interview with Gian Smith. Gian Smith, thanks for joining the Gulf Coast Poker Podcast.
Thanks, guys, for having me. I'm excited.
So we've known each other for a while, and I've been really looking forward to reconnecting and talking to you a little bit. You wear a lot of hats, so I feel like we can go in a lot of different directions. Usually, the way we start though is with a poker centric question. So, how did you take us all the way back, if you could? How did you first get into poker?
I'm gonna guess I have a similar origin story to a lot of people my age. I was a Rounders baby. So probably around, I guess I was like 19 or 20. And I've always had just like a love for card games. My uncle played cards at family reunions. They play a lot of bid whisks. They play spades sometimes. I played a lot of spades in college, and those aren't really gambling games, or at least we didn't play them that way. And I do have a bit of a gambling spirit. I do like to bet on things that I think I'm good at. So it was just an inevitable collision that was going to happen. But then you put John Malkovich and Matt Damon in a movie, and you got a soundtrack with a heavy bass line and some moody jazz music, and now I'm all in. So after that, I had to really actually learn the game, spend some time playing with the game. I had a couple of other friends who were my age also, and we all at the same time just kind of started playing our own little house game for me for about 2 years until I actually turned 21 and was able to make it into Harrah's. Harrah's opened in '99, and in I want to say in September or October. My birthday was May, so I had only been 21 for like 4 months, and I had only been playing poker for like 2 years against other novice teenagers when I sat on the green felt for the first time.
So yeah, would you mind talking a little bit more about those early days? Because I'm always fascinated. I didn't get down to Nola so much later. But it's interesting. I'm sure like coming back later on as a dealer, as you did, versus like walking into that early room in like the late '90s, early 2000s. Like what was your experience like in those early years?
Ben, I'm serious. When I walked into Harrah's the first time, I had never felt more comfortable in a place that wasn't a basketball court. I I was just blown away at like the bigness of it. And I've not felt that way about a casino since, to be honest. I've been to Vegas, Atlantic City, I've been to all these places, but like that first time walking into Harrah's, it just felt like it was, the energy in there and the like the people who were all gathered around the tables. People were like spiffy at the poker table. Everybody was, just really just buying into the fact that we finally had like a really big casino that was, land-based and a big attraction. And a lot of those people were, just hopping back and forth, playing whatever they could. Some of them ended up in the poker room. And the first time I sat down was at the 1 to 5 stud table. And man, I remember the table like it was yesterday. It had that green crushed velvet, and then like when you swiped it one way, it would be like, a lighter shade of green. You swipe it back, it'd be like the forest green. And it was just so exciting being there. I would stay just playing 1 to 5 poker on $35. I would just be in there for 5, 6 hours, not making any money, or I'm losing like a little bit, like 10, $15, but it was, I mean, it was just such a good energy being in there, that I just wanted to just immerse myself in it. So yeah, that was the early days. Some of the dealers that were there even in like the later poker rooms were around back then. Frank was around back then. You remember Frank Bellhead,
He's
Surly
still he's still he's still here. Yeah.
man. Yeah, he was
Holding it down.
Was he just like a joy to be with back then as well?
Frank has maintained a very consistent personality for all of the 25 years I've known him, and even when I worked with him. But I mean, like, and I say that in love, like I fucking love Frank, and can I curse on this? I don't know.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Of course I can. But yeah, but no, Frank has always just been hilarious to me, because I've never seen somebody simultaneously hate his job, but find joy in talking shit about it so much. But yeah, he's a good memorable character for me, for sure.
And then
Yeah,
was
he's still there doing that.
Mm-hmm.
I was just asking about the other dealers who were still around too.
And let's see. So who else was there at the time? Jackie was there. Uh Ken wasn't. Ken and um what's Ken's buddy's name? Wes. Ken and Wes, they weren't at Harrah's dealing yet. They were at Boomtown, but they would come and play a lot. A lot of the same players too that I see. Like a lot of the 4-8 players have carried over. I don't know if I could call out all their names. But yeah, it was a strong group of people that still stuck around as long as we've had poker on Canal Street in New Orleans. So
Sure. Yeah. And at that time, having watched Rounders and being sort of intoxicated by the energy of the place, were you aiming to play for a living, or were you just aiming to have a good time? What was your intention at that time?
of course, absolutely, that was the dream. And I mean, there was a solid probably year and a half or so where I was actually doing really, really well, mostly on like the online sites and the online tournaments. Um, there was a shift at Harrah's at some point where it went from mostly half and half to mostly Hold'em. And right around that time, I was starting to get like a good grasp on Hold'em as a cash game, and I was doing okay at that point too. But at that age, I I didn't have like a bankroll to have an actual poker career. I was surviving as like a 25-year-old, 20, 23, 25 in that range, who could eat from the dollar menu at McDonald's every night, like if I busted out. So, the stakes were a little bit lower when I had those dreams of grandeur. But it was for a time, like I was able to, just win enough tournaments on, I think it was pokerroom.com. This was, before the apps, you had to play on a desktop. But I would play a lot of tournaments. I'd play a little bit of cash in there, and then really I'd go in the casino and kind of just play for fun. I'd play a little bit of the 10-20 game, the straight Omaha 10-20 game, and I'd hold my own in that every now and then. But then as like time passed, and I'm realizing, well, you're not actually that good of a poker player. Like you're right at the margins. And even if you are like a really good poker player, like you're gonna have to take some hits that you kind of can't take. So I don't know, make another way, bud. And then yeah, and I figured that out around the mid-20s, and so that was when my dream of becoming a poker dealer started to actual. So yeah.
Bill, did you have a question?
No, but I mean, just to follow up, so what was that transition like going from player to dealer?
Yeah, I tell you what, I have among the career choices that I've made, and I've made many, um, poker dealing was one of my favorites by far. I make movies now. I coached basketball for a while, and those were definitely like the two most fulfilling career choices I've made. But just in terms of like a job that I really enjoy and paid me well, like poker dealing was my favorite job for like of jobs. Um, it was an immediate like sink for me, having spent so much time on the one side of the table, and evaluating dealers, having my opinions about dealers, watching them make mistakes that would cost me money or other people money. Not that that happened that often, but like the ramifications of losing a $200-300 pot because a dealer burned and turned too early while they were chatting it up with a customer. I'm not going to call out who actually did that. But like seeing that real time, and having to think about this pot being pushed towards somebody else because my river card changed definitely affected how I approached the game as a professional dealer, and and the care that I took with the game, which isn't, that's not to say that I didn't never make mistakes, because obviously that happened. But for sure I went in there with a really good like sense of propriety and respect for the game, and just respect for making the game the best game for all the players. That was just, it was important to me just because of my experience. And it wasn't that difficult to do. A lot of poker dealing is just having a voice and like having the courage to make sure that the players understand that you're the one who's in charge. It doesn't have to be like an overbearing thing. It just has to be, like consistent and affirming. And people, that if they, and then if they know that you're not, like if they see that you're good on the math, they see that you're not pushing the pots the wrong places, they see that your focus is here and not on the girls passing by. I mean, well, not saying that you're not gonna look, but at least you're mostly looking here. People will give you a lot of grace and respect. And I enjoyed that about running a poker game, was that I always, I mean, as much as any job that I've ever had, I felt like I was always in control. I felt like, like this is something you have wisdom and talent in, and so you can make the best situation for a lot of people in your 30 minutes. And people, like, even if they don't necessarily like say it out loud, or even if they don't think about it, like, I know that they would be happy when I was coming to deal their game. They knew it was going to move fast. They knew it was going to move with purpose, and that the only thing they would have to worry about is, am I playing poker well?
So yeah, I'd love to connect some of the other dots in your life, because like, it's fascinating to me, having a lot of friends who are artists, and there's the question of how do you make art and how do you make a living? And you've been making films, and you've also been a poet for a long time, and I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about how those interests came about. I mean, would you say it was poetry first or film, or did they come up together side by side?
For me, film's definitely the most recent of my creative interests. Poetry was something that I kind of played around with in my teenage years. I played basketball at the time, and that was definitely helping, like, with my confidence as a human being. But there wasn't the attention from girls on basketball that I thought there would be when I started practicing it. Funny how they didn't like my point guard skills and my no look passes as much as I thought. But then I started to dabble in poetry a little bit, and I mean, I guess I was a decent poetry writer at that time, but I wasn't really taking it seriously. I just kind of did it casually. And then when I got into college, I had an experience where I was at a poetry show performing or reading a poem, and there were two people who were sitting in the front of the show, like literally feet from me, who were just talking the whole time while I was performing. And at the time, I just thought, that's the rudest thing that ever happened, and I'm never doing this again at one of these shows. That's me at 19 years old. As I got older, I realized, well, you were saying a shitty poem that nobody wanted to hear, and like, you're not entitled to the mic just because you want to. Like, if you want people to pay attention to you, then be good at it. And then I thought back on that after Hurricane Katrina, when I made the decision, okay, I'm definitely not going to be a poker player. And this was before I actually became a poker dealer too. But I was at that kind of crossroads of, what am I going to do? I'd always thought to myself, I'll be an artist of some kind. I probably thought I was more inclined to be a novelist. My dad was a college professor. He forced a lot of novels into my hands, and I had good experiences with my attempts at writing prose. So I thought, yeah, but one day I'll probably, write novels and that kind of thing. And I was like, I could see myself maybe like dabbling in film a little bit. But then when Hurricane Katrina happened, and it was like, okay, tomorrow isn't promised, like, let's get the ball on the road. The first thing that I picked was poetry. I thought I would have more visibility with that because it was performance related, because you stand up in front of a crowd, because you only have to write a 3 to 4 minute poem to actually have a stage. And those things appealed to me, being able to come up with content that I didn't have to invest a lot of time into, but I could, just laser focus on for a little while to come up with, and be able to, build an audience really quick. So I went all in with poetry, right out of Katrina, and it really did prove to be beneficial. I don't know how many tangents I'm allowed to take with this question, but my first kind of success with poetry, we started an open mic. I was really observant and wanted to understand what poetry could be for me, like what my best case was. So I would watch a lot of poets and study their performance, their cadence that they were speaking with. And when I say poetry, I'm talking about spoken word poetry, which you know, the distinction for people who may not have relationship with these genres, poetry is you might think of like what's on a page, and it's, you know, it has probably simple rhyme schemes, if rhyme schemes at all, and it's not really made for a performance in general. It's made for people to read and appreciate, even though you may hear someone read poetry at a poetry reading if they're reading from their book. But spoken word is a whole different animal. Spoken word is what slam poetry was born out of, which slam poetry is the competitive form of poetry where they put time, you know, limits and give you prompts sometimes, or you know, there's all kinds of ways that you can be confined within the parameters of the poetry that you have in order to compete against your peers. But you know, spoken word was the thing that I veered towards because I had a background with stage a little bit. I had done some acting because I had a lot of people who had affirmed for me for a long time that I had a creative path that I could take and that I was good speaking and, you know, being out in front of an audience. And so all those things really just to me seemed like a no-brainer for poetry. And I would, you know, I went in there, like I said, I studied other poets. I would bring in a video camera to record myself so that I could go home and watch myself and see what I did and didn't like about my performance. I would use that same video recorder to record the other poets so that I could go home and study some of their mannerisms, pick up things that I like, study their poetry and their delivery and their cadence, and, you know, work it into me discovering my own voice. And you know, this ended up being a really fruitful endeavor because this was again 2006, right? Post Katrina, right around the dawn of YouTube. And this is before we had cameras in our phones. This is before people had a lot of tech savvy around anything computer related. So there were a lot of poets who really had to rely on me for whatever web presence they could have because they didn't have the means to record themselves, and they didn't have the means to they didn't have the wisdom or the knowledge to be able to upload their work onto a platform where they could share it with their audience or build their audience. And so me, a newbie to the scene, I got to integrate really quickly, and you know, and my networking was made very easy by the fact that I was a niche person for them in a way that most people weren't. So I parlayed those really good relationships into a poetry show that I knew that I could get, you know, a lot of support for because I had the favor of a lot of people in the community. And that poetry show, it's called Pass It On. We started it November 22nd of 2008, and it was a hybrid poetry, music, and visual art show. And it literally is still going on to this day. Our next show is May 18th. We were doing it weekly for the first couple of years. At this point, we do it once a month for 6 months out of the year. But now we got a little spot at this at the Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities, doing a regular show. And it you know, they pay us to be there. They let us pay the art. They give us money to pay the artists. So it's a great situation that that was born out of you know, that attempt to make myself relevant in an art form. I could keep going about this. I don't know. Y'all let me know.
Yeah, no, I love it. I just wanted to ask one other question
Yeah.
related to the poem you wrote called "Oh Beautiful Storm," which was featured in I think it's the second season trailer for Treme around 2011. And I mean, you know, I've always loved David Simon's work. It's a very very notable series, and so yeah, I wonder if you could kind of speak to how that happened, where you kind of got on their radar.
For sure. So yeah, as you mentioned, that was around 2011. Again, I had Pass It On going for a couple of years. So you know, I had a pretty good standing in the poetry community. You know, I will acknowledge I was a pretty good poet, but I wasn't the best poet. I wasn't my favorite poet. And I'd only been in it for a couple of years, whereas there were people who were in it a long time on the other side of Katrina. So, it really was luck and network that helped propel me into that spotlight. My dad, as I mentioned, was a professor. He was a Tulane professor of English for around 30 years or so. Very revered on the campus, had a lot of good relationships with students and faculty, and a couple of his students that ended up becoming faculty and were now in the English department had a little bit of agency when um, the show Treme was just starting. Guy named Shane Lee. I'm not sure where he is now. I think he might be in Houston. That's the last place I knew that he was. He did a class at Tulane on the wire uh, right around 2010, 2009, 2010. And it was like an unheard of thing at universities in New Orleans at the time. So it was like a groundbreaking thing to like have a class about a TV show, but it was received really well, and it allowed him to develop a relationship with Clark Peters, I think Wendell Pierce, some of the people who were in that show who were now in New Orleans for the sake of making Treme, which I think is how he ended up getting the relationship with David Simon and Eric Overmyer, who were also obviously in New Orleans, just finished the first season of Treme, and we're now moving into the second. And so what Shane did was he parlayed those relationships into a symposium that happened at Tulane, where it was open to the public, and 500 to 600 people came in to hear a conversation with David Simon, Eric Overmyer, two professors, Joel Dinnerstein and Beretta Smith Shamad, and an artist from the community have a conversation about Treme. Uh, their options were Trombone Shorty and me. And so they went with me because I had a cheaper price tag than Trombone Shorty. So I got invited to talk on this panel. Fun fact, at the time I had not finished watching Treme, so I had to do a quick binge. I'd watched the first episode and a half, and I wasn't that impressed at first. And then the show picked up. The show, it got a lot better. The writing got better. I think, things started to calibrate. And by mid-season, the collection of characters wasn't as overwhelming because we had spent more time with them. And the show ended up being something that I liked, which it was helpful that I had to be on this panel and have this conversation about it, which made me appreciate it. But in addition to having to speak about the show Treme from the perspective of the everyday artist / New Orleanian, they asked me if I would be interested in writing a poem about the neighborhood of Treme. So I said, sure, why not? Like, I can do that. I didn't know anything about the neighborhood of Treme. I mean, I had like some very basic knowledge from, growing up and going on the field trips, but
What part of town did you grow up in?
I grew up in New Orleans East.
Okay.
I've lived half my life in New Orleans East, and I live in the 7th Ward now. And so at the time I was in the 7th Ward, not far from Treme, but still didn't have like a personal connection with it too much. But my dad, who grew up not far from where I live now in the 7th Ward and spent plenty of time in Treme and was, very learned on New Orleans in general, he did. So I went to him and I said, Dad, I got to write this poem for the thing at Tulane I'm on about Treme. What you got for me? So he goes upstairs to his room. He comes back with like a stack of books and a DVD. He's like, here's Treme. Have at it. That's not, I was thinking more of an interview, but all right, fine. So, I went and did the research. Again, it's 2011, so this is what, 33-year-old me. I'm still not really an adult. This is my so my first son, he's 14. his mom was pregnant with him at the time of the symposium. And you know, I was again living a very like low means lifestyle. I wasn't playing poker anymore, but I was like substitute teaching, just doing like odd jobs and trying to be a creative and, you know, make poetry work for me. And so, you know, this was an opportunity. So I did the work, came back 2 weeks later, memorized the poem as best I could. I remember the day of the event. I'm looking at myself in the mirror, trying to like spit the poem out and you know, not like forget any words or get lost in it. And I got the paper in my hand and I made the decision. I'm like, look, if you go in there with this paper, you're just gonna read off the paper and you're not gonna give a good performance. So just like leave the crutch, and you know, if you're good at this, if you're supposed to do it, then you'll do it, and if not, then you weren't supposed to do it anyway. And I went in there, and I had only slept a couple of hours because I had to finish the last couple of episodes of Treme so I could be an informed participant on the panel. I got up there on the stage, and when they called me, it was my time to perform. It was the best performance that I had done up until that point. It was pretty good. And David Simon, who was sitting 15 feet from me, was like, he showed his approval, and he kind of hinted at like, we'll get back with you, which I didn't know what that meant. I didn't want to dig, but I was like, you're David Simon. I'm sure you know how to find me if you want. I'm not hiding. So finished that up, felt really good about it. And literally the next day, I woke up with this pain in my head and like really irritable sensation under my nose and like right around my eyes. And by like 2 p.m., hours later, I was starting to see blisters pop up in my forehead and in my face. And I was like, what's happening? Am I dying? I called my friend who's a doctor, and he says, no, that sounds like you have the shingles. I got the shingles from writing and performing this poem. From the shingles is, for again people who don't have a relationship with it, it's a reactivation of the chicken pox that happens in adulthood, usually in like late adulthood for much older people, and it's usually induced by stress. And I had never felt as much stress as I was feeling at this time. I wasn't even aware of how much stress there was. Again, about to have a kid for the first time, being super broke, and with this enormous opportunity at my feet, not only because it was an opportunity to impress David Simon, who I have watched The Wire all the way through literally 20 times at this point. So, I was all in on The Wire. And, Treme was a show that was here. Like, those opportunities were like immense. But then also, my dad was going to be in that audience. And I was a Tulane student for about 5 years until I was a Tulane student because he was a professor there. And as long as I was his, what's the word, dependent, I got to go there for free. I didn't realize that that dependent tag had an expiration date, so I didn't finish at Tulane because I definitely didn't prioritize my education, and definitely also left a trail of indifference to my education behind me, which as I got older and like thought about it more and how that might have reflected on him, became like a point to me that I didn't know how I could make up to him, but this was that chance for me to do something significant at that university in front of all his peers. So that moment was really, really big for me, and there was a lot on it, and there was a lot of pressure on that I was putting on myself to deliver, and I did it. And then the shingles were like, all right, well, we were waiting on you, but today is the day. And man, like literally, I think it was this side of my face. Literally, like this part of my face was just covered in scars and blisters, and and I thought I would never look the same again. Like I thought I was just gonna like it looked it didn't look like vitiligo, but it looked like something had happened to me. My nerves were messed up. It, you know, it was affecting my nervous system, and I would like rub my eyebrow because it was itching. I rubbed my eyebrow off with the palm of my hand, like just because I was scratching so much. I looked up one day, I was like, I have an eyebrow now. I mean, but you know, it didn't matter with all the scars. It was just more weirdness there. But yeah, it was hard on me. But couple of months, this would have been in like October. Couple of months passed, January rolled around. I'm having dinner with a friend of mine. Her name's Dorcas. She was visiting from Charlotte at the time. She went to Tulane with me. And we're talking about, she's like, so did you ever talk to anybody from the show afterwards? Like, what's the deal? And I was like, well, I'm waiting for them. I guess nobody hit me up. She's like, well, maybe you should. And I was like, okay, cool. So like the next day I sent an email to the one guy who I had actually like had a conversation with. His name's Brian Venable. I'm not even sure what his role was, but he was producing that day. And so I hit him up. And you know, he's like, we'll get back to you. Within a week, I got responses from two different departments at HBO. One that wanted to clear the usage of the poem that I did for their commercial that they were about to shoot about that symposium, and talk and in talks with me to do a commercial for the show. And then David Simon's people hit me up about being on the show and performing a poem in an episode. Both of those things kind of came at the same time, which was amazing. I shot the first commercial, which was "Oh Beautiful Storm." They asked me about any other poetry that I might have that might be relevant, and I was like, I mean, I got something I think it'd be perfect for you. I sent them "Oh Beautiful Storm." I sent them a recording of me performing it. Of course, I had that since I brought the cameras with me every time. And they were like, love it. Let's make a commercial around it. And then when it was time for me to talk to the people about shooting the show, they were like, yeah, we're gonna get you performing, and then we're gonna get the guy who we're introducing to perform right after you. What do you want to perform? And I'm like, I mean, well, I might as well do the poem about Treme that got me the opportunity. So I got to do both of those poems were on Treme in separate ways. I ended up doing another commercial for Treme down the line because the first commercial was so popular. Um, and that was an absolutely amazing time that was so memorable. That commercial with "A Beautiful Storm," it was the season 2 trailer. So season 1 had already happened, and you know they had a good following. They're leading into season 2, and their highlight reel that they're making with all the clips of the show that's coming up. It's underscored by me sitting in this church, looking out in the window, having this conversation with myself about Hurricane Katrina through this poem, "Oh Beautiful Storm." It was a really well produced commercial, and there was no doubt that it really hit because they were playing it constantly. And you know, HBO has like 7 stations. They got HBO, HBO West, HBO Deportes. You know, so they were playing this commercial on every channel, like 20-25 times a day. I was in Atlanta visiting a friend, and we're just hanging out, and he's got HBO on, and I pop up on TV, and he's like, this isn't weird to you? Like, this just regular now? I'm like, I mean, no, but yeah, it's kind of awesome. Great experience. I got to be on National Public Radio. They did an interview with me about they talked about the initial poem. I performed a little bit of the other poem. I grew up listening to NPR with my dad. That was how I got the news about Magic Johnson having HIV. Was listening to NPR. So just, you know, like a lot of really affirming moments came to. I remember sitting in a restaurant afterwards with my dad and one of his friends, and the topic of Treme came up, and I was explaining something that David Simon had said to me after the commercial came out, before we shot the next commercial. And he basically said we should just make make you the whole campaign. And like I remember my dad's reaction. He's like, "That's what I'm talking about." And you know, my dad's he's a very calculated, very measured person. Very, always keeps a very even keel, like kind of space. Except when he's watching basketball and getting really excited, or if he's like really into something and it's funny. So I'd seen outbursts of emotion, but I'd never seen that like with any of my work. You know what I mean? And so like that, it's just a really like gratifying moment that I'll always remember, that whole period of time, just feeling like, okay, like, no one can ever say that you didn't do significant things in poetry, which was what I had set out to do. So yeah, it was a beautiful experience, and I still cherish it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And we'll link to the clip is still on YouTube. So we'll link to that so folks can check it out if they'd like to. And yeah, I want to talk about.
Jake, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Gene.
Quickly, I'm a big Wire fan too. Who is your favorite character on there?
D'Angelo Barksdale.
Oh, okay.
So, I'm glad you asked me that question. I've thought about it so many times, and the answer's changed so many times. But right now, I'm on D'Angelo just because I feel like that's what David Simon would say. I feel like he embedded so much of what the show is about into D'Angelo, because it's a cops and robbers show, but anybody who's watched it knows it's really about the inequity of Baltimore, but on a bigger scale, America.
Yeah.
And when we watch D'Angelo and the interactions that he has with the other dealer, the hoppers he's the lieutenant for, they're having some really sophisticated conversations. And they're it's clear that these are talented people with intellect, but they are pigeonholed into a lifestyle that only has two possible endings. And unfortunately, D'Angelo ends up in both of those. Which his entire point, I think, with that series is that we are forcing our most talented into positions that will never work out for any of us because of bureaucracy, because of games and politics, because of a system that has been engineered for this very thing. And so, we at the top of this system have no motivation to clean it up and to make it better. So yeah, D'Angelo was for like everything that he was given as a line, I felt was like memorable, interesting, brilliant, or like driving the plot. And as an actor, like he had so many roller coasters of emotion, having to manage his place in this game that he clearly didn't belong in. So yeah, that's my
Good
guy.
deal, man. Thanks.
What's yours, Gene?
The bunk. It's
Well,
got to be the bunk. Yeah.
yeah.
The best scene was when him and Omar, he confronted Omar when that girl got killed in his crew. And he's talking about when they were in school and how you had to be good with your fists. Nothing says more about the way we were raised compared to the way the kids are running around with what every one of them's got a gun nowadays. I mean, hey, we would get in a fist fight and then a week later you're back friends with the guy. But man, nowadays it's just crazy.
Yeah, no, that's a good scene. Yeah, the bump.
Some nice overlap too between the Wire and Treme actors, because Wendell Pierce is front and center, Treme as well.
Yep, you're right.
Before we get too far away from Treme, I wanted to make sure I can find it. What episode was the poem that you read in the second season? Because Ben shared the trailer with me. I really enjoyed that before this podcast, but I definitely like to look that up and watch that as well. Do you remember?
It's season 2, episode 5. And I think it's like at the 43-minute mark.
Awesome. Okay.
There's a scene where they're introducing the Asian guy who has like the gold teeth and all the tattoos on his face. That it's the first scene where they're introducing him at a poetry show, and then Steve Zahn's character, I can't remember what his name is on the show, but he plays the radio DJ guy, and I think it's the scene where he discovers that artist at this open mic. So right before he comes up, I'm delivering a poem, and then I step off, and then they introduce the character that they're gonna keep around. So yeah.
Okay.
So again, yeah, I want to talk about your films, of course, but first I want to just ask a couple quick more dealer questions. So you started in like 2015-ish, is that right?
I started in 2016, I think. Let me think about it. Yes, I started in no. Let me think about this. 20. I think I think you're right. I think I started in the fall of 2015. I think you're right. 2016, I dealt through the summer of 2017, and I think I worked there for about 2 years. So yeah, that sounds right.
Okay, yeah. I found a couple of your Facebook posts, and I just wanted to ask you if you to speak on them a little bit. The first post,
Did some research. It's great.
yeah, I love to get in there. And the first post is called "A Tiny Act of Resistance," and I don't know how much, if you want to get into specific detail about that encounter, but I'd love to hear you talk about the legendary whining of the 412 half and half player pool, because it's been much discussed among dealers, and I think it has grown into this sort of mythical quality.
Oh man. Yeah, so at that time there was this transition from mostly half and half to the room to mostly hold'em, and by this point I think there was literally only one 4A12 game 1 day a week, maybe 2 days. Maybe I think it was like 4A12 on Sundays, 15:30 on Tuesdays, and that was the only Omaha you could find in there. So all of the 4A12 players are, they're like they're in there on Sunday. Waiting list is deep. They got, what do you call it? When the game feeds into the other, what you call that? Must move. They got, a must move for the must move. And the people who are sitting at these tables, they know as soon as they get up, they're back on the bottom of the list. So like they're just rebuying and rebuying. And 4A12, I mean, let's just go ahead and put it out there. Before I started dealing, the last time I played half and half, before I started dealing, was the first time I sat and actually watched the rake. And I watched $200 come off that table in an hour. And if you know anything about half and half, it's a white chip game. Most people are buying in for like 100 at a time. Some people are like short buying for like 40 and 60. So like $200 is like two people's buy-in, and that's just gone. Like that's between the rake and the jackpot, it's just gone. And then I thought about it. I'm like, no wonder everybody's always upset. Everybody here is losing. No winner in this game. And once my eyes opened, and I was like, I'll never play this game again unless I'm like just playing it to be drunk and have fun. Like some people will win, like if you're really hot, but like there's no way to sustain yourself in that game, right? And so this is knowledge that I have going into my poker dealing experience as well. So, I do have like some sensitivity for these people, but at the same time, man, the 4A12 players, like some of them, they can be just like a handful. Again, I was one of them for a long time. I did have I feel like I must have had a pretty good reputation. I didn't hear what people said about me when I wasn't around, but I definitely heard people talk shit to the dealers when they had a problem with the dealer, and there wasn't a whole lot of that, right? So I felt like people at the very least respected that I was not going to make a mistake, and if I wasn't deciding that the river card was going to be the 7 of clubs, like that wasn't up to me, they would accept that from me. So I didn't get as much flack, but I definitely heard the chirping. I knew like what other dealers were dealing with. And then there were some people at the table who, like, even though they wouldn't say things to me, I know they didn't like me. One woman in particular, and I'm definitely not going to say her name, but she has since transitioned. Rest in peace to this lady. But man, she was so miserable. and I don't think it was because she was losing. I felt like she probably had a whole lot of money and it didn't even matter to her. I think she just was like not having a whole lot of fun being alive. And she would take it out on the dealers. She'd just get like belligerent. She would talk trash. She would say these comments to the air. She didn't have any friends at the table. None of the players liked her either. But she would like talk into the ether as if, everybody was there hoping to receive that message, and just talk so much shit about the dealers. And what are the dealers gonna do? Tell her to shut up? And no, of course not, because I don't know, they can't be rude to the customers because of their job, much less because the customers are the ones paying them. So people just had to eat it. I don't even remember what happened on this particular day, the Tiny Act of Resistance Day. I do know that it was the first day that she actually felt empowered to challenge me on something. And I also know that she was wrong. And the foot came down very swiftly and demonstratively. And I felt really good about the chance to do that, not just for me, but for my fellow dealers and for the players who all wanted to, just back off a little bit, So it was a good day. And I don't know, I love that job again, but I mean, I knew they weren't about to fire me for speaking up to this person in particular, who every person in there had some experience with. So I was like, whatever, I'll be the guy. No, lady, we're not doing it your way. This is my game, and if it's not, it's Harrah's game. But you're at the bottom of the totem pole. So it was a nice day. Good.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. I think it's would come as no surprise to you to hear that this is more of a player focused podcast. We've tended to have players on, so it's always nice to have the dealer perspective to remind us when we're not at our best, what y'all are going through.
So you were dealing before Katrina, or were you playing at that point?
Yeah, I didn't start dealing until I think right around 2015. That's probably right.
Oh, okay.
And then I kept dealing through maybe 2019, almost to the pandemic. But yeah, before then, just a player. And I was playing a little bit less and less, right before I started dealing. Again, it started to dawn on me that this game in particular that I play Hold'em. I prefer Hold'em in a tournament setting because, again, I'm not coming with the bankroll most people are for Hold'em. I'm coming with a short stack every time. I'm sitting at the 1-3 table with $100 or $200, and I'm just I'm gonna wait for a hand I feel good about before I start committing money and just trying to knit my way to a win. Which sometimes it works, and then sometimes you take a big loss and then you just have to chill out for a while. So Hold'em wasn't ever really my thing. So the Omaha game felt more interesting to me, but that's the game where you're probably, gonna walk home a loser like everybody else at the table who all just fed the jackpot for a tourist who's gonna come in and win. And
you remember they used to have a 6-12 limit game before Katrina? Used to have a 6-12 game there at Harrah's. It'd go every day, and it never went after the storm. It's just weird.
I might have missed that part in particular, but yeah, I've seen some interesting iterations of poker. They find all the ways to get us to put money in the pot, right?
Yeah, you're right.
How much do you play nowadays? Do you play much at all, or?
Not really. I play every now and then. I played maybe about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Let me think. It might have been I think it might have been when the first round of the playoffs began. I played maybe 3 or 4 days in a row. And now, if I feel the itch, because I still like poker, it still feels really good to sit there and, have to be thoughtful about money and like, and have like that natural focus that comes with, wanting to make sure that you're on top of things and not making mistakes. So like I still definitely enjoy that. But I don't have as much time to put into it. And if you're not really going to invest in poker, like, if you're just going to be a casual player, it's just got to be about fun for you. It can't be about trying to make sure that you're capitalizing at all these margins. Cause like, it's like you won't be able to have a consistent winning phase. At some point you're going to have a losing phase too. And you got to be ready to handle that. And I'm not that guy. So I'll play until I lose basically, which, if I sit in the first time and I take a loss, well, all right, I'll come back in a couple of months. This time I happened to win a couple of days in a row before I took a loss. And then, after that, yeah, I wasn't like, I looked at myself, I said, okay, here's the mistakes you made. You definitely made some mistakes. There was some bad luck here, a couple of spots, but, probably time for you to take another break. So I don't know. I played, maybe about 3 weeks ago or so, I played for about 3 or 4 days. I'll probably play again in like, I don't know, maybe the end of the summer. I'll go back in there or something. I might just go in for like, I'll go in and play the 4-8-12 on a Sunday again for fun. I'll sit there with $100 just to, to play and not worry about the fact that it's going to get eaten up. But if I'm going to play like Hold'em, I'll wait till I got a lot of time and I'm not afraid, to lose $500, which that don't happen that often. I need my money. So
Do you ever fire any of the tournaments, like the weeklies or the Saturday tournaments or anything like that?
I haven't played I have before, but I haven't played any of them in a while, maybe like a year or two since I've played any of the Harrah's tournaments, which that's what I was thinking about again, because I still do like tournament play, even though I don't even get in tournaments as much. I like tournament play. Everybody comes in with, same stack. Like I'm all for that. The rebuy tournaments, I might be a little bit more like, well, you got 10 bullets, I'm only coming in one. I might stay, away from like some of those, but like some of these, so like I'll play some of the small tournaments that happen at some of these memory bars, right? Where the buy-in's like $50 and it's like, okay, you can reload 5 times for $50 and whatever. Like I'm not scared of you getting more bullets for this tournament, but every now and then I'll think about the fact that I do feel like I'm better suited as a Hold'em player for tournament play, and think, well, if you're gonna play poker, you might as well find a good tournament. And I'll think about like going on the coast to Biloxi to do one of theirs. I haven't pulled the trigger on one lately just because it's always been like the timing. Like when those tournaments come up, I'm usually doing something movie related or just just got like something going on. But soon, one day soon, I'll be at a tournament, hopefully at a final table, thanking myself for that decision. So.
So I wanted to ask about your most recent film venture, which explicitly has to do with poker, and which I am very fortunate to have been involved in the project, albeit in a very small way. But yeah, the Capitalist is your latest project. Love to hear you just kind of describe, first of all, how you got the idea and the motivation, like why you wanted to make a film that is explicitly about poker in a certain way, or poker is used as a vehicle to explore some core themes. So yeah, how did the ideas come about, and yeah, what are your thoughts now on kind of on the other side of it?
Yeah. First of all, let me just go ahead and say you have a really big, important role. Okay. You were part of like the most essential scene. And I don't know if you know this, but on my Instagram that I'd have for the Capitalist, I post screen caps when I get accepted into a new festival, I'll put the laurel on a screen cap. So I think the most recent festival, I've got the screen cap of you like
Love it.
and my
Love
friend next to you like with that look
Yeah.
on her face. So yeah. So you're out there, man. You are exposed. The movie The Capitalist, it's it's about the heist of a marijuana dealer's private poker game. And at the surface, it's kind of kind of like an Ocean's 11 type film with a little bit of like Goodfellas, in the sense that, you know, there are reveals and you know, setups and misdirection, and you're not supposed to exactly know what's going on, even though you're being fed information, because then there's a twist that happens at the end that clears things up in a different way. Um, and I won't expose everything about it, but I will say that at the core of the movie, there are conversations about American capitalism, that, you know, I think poker is a really great place to start those conversations. Stuff that I noticed as a poker dealer, a lot of the people that I would be dealing to, you know, they have very pointed opinions about government, about our leaders, about themselves. There are a lot of people who come to poker. This, you know, my opinion, and maybe this won't be popular. There are a lot of people, in my opinion, who come to poker because they like losing. I think that there are a lot of people who want an excuse for things not to be their fault when they go awry. I think people want to have a great story about how I was born under a bad sign. I would have done X, Y, and Z if I wouldn't have gotten bad beat on that pot. Or you know, just to have like something to say, this is why I'm not achieving at my best, because I'm unlucky. Look at it. I really feel like there are a lot of people who are drawn to poker because the thrill of having a magnificent loss on display to validate why you haven't become your best self. Like there, you know, and in order for the professional poker players, the people who are, you know, at the top of the food chain consistently, for them to be making money, there's got to be somebody who's consistently losing, right? Or, you know, or a lot of people who are, you know, putting money into this pool. And hearing some of the, you know, some of the conversations that I would hear from people who it seemed like their purpose was to find a way to express why things weren't going well for them. A lot of them aligned with, you know, with some things that I would recognize about how people felt about our government and our choices for president. Yeah, there was just a lot of overlap in these sentiments and the way people felt about uh, our economy, about our you know, weaknesses, and you know, rightfully, and you know, also you could probably do a little bit more to, you know, work on your game too. You know what I mean? Like, or you know, or in, you know, in terms of poker, work on your game, but in terms of life, like work on yourself. You know, it isn't always about the president holding you back. Like sometimes you just didn't want to get the promotion, or you didn't show your boss that you were capable, or you know, whatever. It isn't that you were born to lose. Like sometimes you know, perpetuate the losing because you don't want to figure out how to win. um and you know, poker is America's game, not just because like it's a chance for every man to ascend to the greatest heights and be that person on the World Series of Poker on ESPN, like Chris Moneymaker and Greg Raymer. It, you know, it's that too, but it's also because this is a chance for me to have a go down in flames moment, or you know, a Tony Montana, you know, hail of gunfire. You know, it's the safest way that I can take a really big loss publicly in a way that I think will reflect on on this narrative about myself that I've been perpetuating. Again, my opinion. But you know, a lot of those things informed the thinking when I wanted to make this movie, because I wanted to make a movie that correlated a metaphor for the kind of people who are being taken advantage of by the people who know that there are those out there who want to lose, whether it's a poker player who sees a mark, or whether it's a politician who thinks that they can manipulate their base into the results that they want. So ultimately, I felt like there was enough material there where I could make some good points that I wanted to make. And I had a very intimate knowledge of poker and poker rooms and poker situations, and in a world that I think is probably fascinating to a lot of people, even if they don't ever, even if they don't ever try it, because they don't have a gambling spirit, or because they don't have, the resources to invest time and money into, the losing that it takes to really understand what it takes to win in poker. I think there are a lot of people who find poker to be a fascinating thing that's always on the outskirts, or, poker is this like kind of like, like the gamblers have a certain mystique with people who are like, oh wow, you're a hustler, a gambler, a person who's outside of law, whatever the bad boy kind of attributes that you get put on when you're doing these kinds of activities that aren't like as mainstream. Like I think there's a whole world of people who are fascinated by poker, and then obviously there's a whole world of poker play. Like we know this is a multi-billion-dollar industry, within the people who do participate. So it seemed like a good opportunity to like tell some stories, make some bigger points, and to make a film about kind of a niche genre subject that that doesn't get a lot of coverage in our narrative films. So that was basically the impetus for moving forward with this project. And I do feel satisfied with being able to express what I was able to in this film. So I felt good about it. Yeah.
So I just wanted to ask you, you mentioned way at the beginning of the podcast that you always kind of had a gambling kind of personality, maybe, or that was part of your life. What other kind of places has gambling manifested itself? Are you talking about basketball, pool, something like that, or?
Probably less on basketball. I mean, I've definitely bet my friends push-ups on a game of horse before, certainly. But uh definitely sports betting, fantasy football. These days, I'm in like 2 fantasy football leagues versus 7. So that's kind of tempered down, but I mean, there's no way I'm not playing fantasy football in any given year, just because I need something to inspire me to watch the Giants Redskins or Giants Commanders game. Otherwise I'm not tuning. Well, Jaden Daniels plays for them now, so I'm in on the Commanders, but Giants lost Saquon, so I don't know. It's gonna be tough to get me to watch them playing the Seahawks. Unless I got Malik Neighbors on my fantasy team this year. We'll see. But definitely sports betting, and I do a little bit of sports betting, not a whole lot, but I mean I do like to have a rooting interest in the games. Sometimes I feel like very convicted, like, oh yeah, Russell Wilson is definitely throwing 3 touchdowns against the Chargers, and then he throws 2. It goes under. But like I definitely will gamble on some sports stuff still these days.
How does that tie into you being a filmmaker? Do you is that kind of imagine me and Gene are kind of entrepreneurs in a way, and kind of having that willing to risk it is important. Is that something that is an attribute for you as well as it relates to filmmaking?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I feel like I definitely attribute a lot of the courage that it takes for me to do this to the fact that I've been built up by adults, specifically like my mom and dad, but also like teachers over the years, and drama teachers that I've had. Like I definitely have had influences tell me you can do this, but it's still a big risk. And I think that the fact that I'm not afraid to take a gamble, like, has helped me move forward in a lot of situations where it probably would have been easier to just be like, nah, um, at the point in my career, my films, they aren't on Netflix. They aren't on the HBO Maxes. My films right now, they're on YouTube. I distribute my films for free. And what I have found in the 9-ish years that I've really started to take filmmaking seriously, what I have found is that the money does come back, whether it's me getting contract work, whether it's me getting hired on other people's productions. I think I mentioned I have a day job now working for a nonprofit called Novak. And I don't get that job with a salary. I don't get that job without the movies that I make, without proving that I can make a movie, that I know how to do it. And so therefore I am someone who's informed enough to instruct other people how to do this, or to lead to lead programming around it. So the 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 money that I've invested in these films has come back to me. It's been channeled to me in different routes, never directly as here's my movie, pay me money to see it. Never here's my movie, I'm putting it in theaters, go buy tickets. Never that route yet. But I still continue to invest money knowing with the belief that every project I make is making me better at this thing and giving me more access to the bigger world of it in a way that's gonna pay off. And so for sure, the first movie that I really did, well, the first project that I really did was a web series about poetry. This was before I was focused on film. This was when I was still focused on poetry. I made a web series about the poetry scene in New Orleans with the goal of highlighting poetry and giving poetry a bigger light so that I could grow that industry. And like I was looking at poker the same way. I was looking at poetry the same way that I saw what the World Series of Poker and Rounders did for poker, right? We all know that what that boom was like from an 80-person field in the World Series of Poker to 8,000 in like 5-6 years, or you know what I mean, like something ridiculous, right? Like I saw what putting it on TV in front of people, in front of a casual audience, and inviting them to it. I saw how that could work, and I went into producing this poetry project with the same idea. Like, if there are people who are exposed to only the best poetry, only like the most serious poets who have dedicated themselves to this craft, and not what you see at a lot of open mics, which is, and this is not a complaint either, or critique. This is just an observation. A lot of poetry open mics you go to, if you're there for 2 hours, you're going to hear 3 poets who have put a whole lot of thought and time into their craft, and they're going to perform for 5 to 7 minutes. So 20-ish minutes that you're going to get of really solid poetry, and probably the other hour and 40 minutes is going to be people who are reading out of their journals, or reading out of their diaries, or reading something that they haven't edited or vetted with other people. They're going to read it for the first time because they just want to get it off their chest. They don't want to be invested in poetry like that. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, right? But poker and poetry, they're both spaces where the minute that you decide you are that, then you are that. I'm a poker player because I say so. And if you go sit down at a poker table 5 out of 7 days a week and put $1,000 in there, even if you're losing, well, you're a poker player. If you're standing up at a poetry reading and you're reading poetry out of your diary, then you're a poet. And these things, like the way that you succeed, quote unquote, or the how you measure success, like that doesn't necessarily matter to some people. And so people who come to these poetry readings just to be a casual viewer of it, if their experience is small experience with the really good poetry people, much more experience with the people who just take it casually, you're going to come away like, I don't know if I like poetry. My idea was that I'm going to make a show where the drama is centered around a poetry event. And then every time you see a poet speaking, it's going to be somebody who's super talented and is going to make you realize, oh, I do like poetry because it's being offered in this way that is really palatable to me. Or at least if you think you have an interest in poetry, you will like this show. That's how I approached it. And that show, it was a gamble because I didn't have any proof that this would work. I just had a belief that it would work. I didn't have any money, and I had no film background, none. I acted in a couple of stage plays, but I had never. I shot poetry at poetry events on camera, but I had never put together a narrative where I had to like edit and cut and make transitions and be thoughtful about how one scene leads to the next. I had never done anything like that. I felt like I intuitively knew how to do these things because I'd watched so many movies and really like appreciated film and films for a long time. And I gambled on myself. It wasn't that much money I put into it. I put a lot of time into it. We shot that series. It was 6 episodes. They were each about 30 minutes. It took a long time to make. It took about 9 months to get everything. And I probably spent maybe like $2,000, not a whole lot of money. I didn't pay most people. I called in a lot of favors. So I spent a lot of that capital, which if you're in New Orleans, favor is part of our economy here. It's how a lot of politicians get things done. Or how they even get in office, really. And so, I used up a lot of my favor to complete that series on the strength that I think I know how to do this. I'm pretty sure I know how to do this, and I'm willing to find out. Once I finished it, it did not have the traction that I wanted it to have bigger than me. It was still only getting to people 1, maybe 2 degrees of separation from me, and not like, an audience that was 6 degrees of separation like I had seen Issa Rae do with her Awkward Black Girl, which eventually got her a deal on HBO. I did not make that kind of mark with this series like I thought I could or wanted to. And a lot of it had to do with all the stuff that I didn't know about filmmaking, including marketing, including distribution, some things that you can't know intuitively just by watching a lot of movies. But it definitely proved to me that I was right about me having talent at making films. And it made me say to myself, yeah, while poetry may have a ceiling that, is a little bit lower, filmmaking is wide open and you have a knack for it and you can do it. And it made me less apprehensive about, let me go invest $2,000-$3,000 into a film. The Capitalist, I invested $13,000 of my own money. It was get a car or make a movie. I made a movie. And and I mean it was 13,000, but that's because I did 4 jobs on the movie that I would have had to pay other people, upwards of $5,000 to do. So I was, I even with that money that I spent, I still got off, a lot cheaper because of the work I was able to put in. But I didn't blink when it was time to put out that money because I said to myself, I said, this movie is going to move the needle for me. I don't know if this movie is going to be Rounders like I want it to be, but it's going to do something for me. It's going to have an impact. And, and I believe that because every time I put my good money into the pot, I come out with a win on the other side of it. So, I do think that, same way that a poker player goes in and just has to view that money as chips. This isn't a trip to Ruth's Chris that I'm, making this call where I think I'm going to lose with. This is just me getting information that's going to benefit me down the line when I do catch this guy in that $500 pot that may not be for 3-4 weeks from now. Who knows? But it's definitely been something where the cost opportunity for me, I know that I'm going to be able to make it up, even though it feels like a risk at the time. Yeah.
So we want to be mindful of your time. I did have one more question, but Bill, Gene, did y'all have any other questions?
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, kind of a couple, but tell me a little bit about without spoiling it or whatever, because I want to watch it on YouTube, but tell me a little bit about just a little bit how poker plays a role in the capitalist.
So what I will say about this in particular is that again, I'm very honest with myself, right? Self-awareness is important as an artist, because if you don't know where you're weak, then you won't get better. And when I made this script, I had something different in mind. Then when we shot it and I edited it, I realized I did not succeed in the ways that I wanted to. So ultimately, what's happened, I think the version of this movie that Ben has seen is a little bit more poker centric than what the final edit became. And there's a phrase for anybody who does work in the film sphere, especially editing. It's called "kill your darlings." And sometimes, in order to make your project work, you have to take out something that you felt really strong about. In this movie, it ended up being a lot of the conversations about poker. So there's this one scene where I'm really trying to set up the fact that there are people who are looking for opportunities to take advantage of other people. And there's a scene where I have my good friend Steven Trainer. I'm sure everybody on this podcast knows him. He's the floor now. I think he had some issues with what you call it,
Carpal tunnel.
Yeah. And he was having some severe pain, so he had to just become a full-time floor. He's playing the role of the big loser because he's my friend and he loves to do that for me. And so there's this scene where I shot him and Erin, who is she's the evening shift manager. I think last time I checked, she was the evening shift manager, and she's like the big winner, and she's outplaying him. And my guy, who again, it's a poker robbery, it's a poker game robbery that the movie is centered around. And so it's not a spoiler to say that there's an inside man who's the one sizing the game up, who infiltrates it. So the inside man, he's, we hear his inner monologue, same way we hear Matt Damon and Rounders talking us through all the nuances of poker. And he's basically explaining why this guy is about to get taken and why this is not an accident, why this is the way things have been arranged. And he's playing his role even if he doesn't know it. And it's a metaphor for American capitalism and for some of the bigger themes in the movie. Ultimately, what happened after maybe after the first couple of edits where I felt like I had gotten all the kinks out and the edit itself was clean in terms of the way the film moved, when I looked at it, it was just dragging a little bit, and the movie wasn't really getting to the point like I wanted it to. And what I realized was that it was a shortcoming for how I had written the poker scenes in there. And I really had to just make a decision, if I want this movie to actually win, then I'm gonna have to cut some of the poker stuff down. It's still plenty of poker. It's a poker game, and and there's still talk about how how poker relates to some of the bigger themes. But there was that scene, and there was one other scene in particular where it's another friend of mine who comes in and he's playing the part of this loser guy who steps in with all the confidence in the world, and they bleed him because he just hasn't taken the time to evaluate himself and where he is in this hierarchy. And so both of those scenes, they were I think just making the movie move in a way that I didn't want it to. Ultimately, the poker that's happening is more about the environment and and where we are in this universe, more so than how they relate to the greater concepts. But I promise you all, I will get it right one day. This again, I'm getting better. This film, it's an investment in not just me as a filmmaker, here's stuff I can do, but it's an investment in me getting better as a filmmaker and learning where my weak spots are so that I can make up for it. I'm gonna make the poker movie. I want to one day. That's a guarantee. This isn't the poker movie I wanted it to be, even though I think a lot of poker players will still find a lot of joy and relatability in the film.
That's interesting. I've written a little bit of fiction, nothing really submitted or published, but every once in a while when I try and incorporate poker, because that to me is very compelling, and as poker players, that narrative that's going on in your head versus maybe what's taking place at the table, I find that fascinating. But what I've learned is that it seems you're kind of speaking to the same point a little bit. Sometimes the poker itself kind of drags down the story that you want to tell, because it's such translating it to maybe a viewer in your case that's not well versed in poker. It comes, there's a lot of obstacles. You kind of got to explain and do a lot more exposition than telling a good tale. Well, at least that's been my experience.
And my film is a short film. It's 16 minutes and 42 seconds long. So time is of the essence. Even taking out 30 to 60 seconds to be able to give a casual person like some understanding of what's happening. Like, really, like, there were things that were happening on screen that would not make sense without at least a little bit of an explanation. And then when you take the time out to try to like set that standard for people who don't know what's going on, now all of a sudden you're kind of taking them out of the movie. And yeah, like the movie's like making a movie where poker is a metaphor for something. I have not figured that out. Right now I feel like if I'm gonna do it, I gotta make a movie that's just about poker. And like poker is the thing that we're talking about. And it has to be like a feature film like Rounders, where we have moments where we can spend 3 to 5 minutes having a conversation about theory and gameplay and things like that that can inform even a viewer who's not close to it, like what they're looking at. So no, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, same.
And as somebody who's watched a lot of poker movies and is interested in representations of poker and art, and who was also on set for your film, one thing I thought you got spot on was just the poker as backdrop in terms of authenticity. I really appreciated just I remember there was a lot of like continuous filming of people just playing. And that was sort of the backdrop for the characters to have conflict and dialogue, and that felt authentic in a way that I've rarely seen in film. So I'm with you. I look forward to whenever you do devote the feature length time to a poker movie. But I did
I'll be calling you because you're going to be in it.
Oh, of course. I mean, clearly now
you're on my trusted actor list
right.
now.
How can I say no at this point? Yes. But I did appreciate the environment, the ambiance, and one thing we've talked about a lot today is like brick and mortar, your time as a dealer. But I really loved the way that you kind of bring the New Orleans private game scene to life in The Capitalist. That's something that I have experience with as well, not as much as brick and mortar, but that's a whole nother world that people see even less than like the bright lights of the WSOP and all that. So I had a blast all the way through.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate you for saying that. And yeah, that's, I feel like in art, a lot of times getting there first can be the thing that really sets you up for success. And we've seen like a little bit of like the underground stuff, like again in Rounders, right? But that's the New York version of it, right? And and that looks different from what it looks like in the South, where it's just it's not poker sharps. It's like a bunch of everyday people who just whatever reason that they're less inclined to be in a poker room, or more inclined to just be in a space that's a little bit more comfortable, like that. It really is like a completely different, not a completely different world, but like a significantly different world than what the poker room version of it looks like. And it definitely helped spending my 2 years following my work at Harrah's, dealing Brian's game, and having access to something like that to file away into the banks and say, one day I'll write about this. So yeah.
Oh yeah, no substitute for that firsthand experience. So yeah, will you keep us in the loop as to when the movie is ready for release? You don't. It sounded like you didn't have a concrete date yet. Is that right? Or you?
So the movie, it's currently in the festival circuit, which to add, to give some nuance for that, basically every film festival is on an annual cycle, and most of them are like around the same time every year. I run a film festival. Mine changes because I'm an erratic person, but the most popular film festival in New Orleans is the New Orleans Film Fest. That's always in like October or November every year. It's you can count on it being in the fall, right around that area. So if you start at any given point, by that time next year, you will have had the opportunity to submit to any film festival you want. So most filmmakers, they take a year to submit to all the film festivals they want. You get in some, you don't get in some. And then once you're done with that, then you make a decision what you're going to do. Am I going to distribute my film? How am I going to distribute my film? What am I going to do with it? I am currently probably like in the early to middle part of my festival run. So I started submitting in maybe like September of last year. There's a film festival called Louisiana Film Prize. You have a chance to win 25 or $50,000 for your film. It's very unique. That film festival is that you don't win money at most film festivals, and certainly not like that. You might, like, some of them might have $2,000 to $5,000 cash prizes, which would be like a lot. 25 to 50,000 is like that's the only film festival I know about like that. I made this film to submit to that film festival. I got in. I did not win 25,000. Only the grand prize winner wins that. I did finish in the top 7, which meant I got a prize. So I did win. I won a grant to shoot another film. So they're giving me, they're gonna put $3,000 towards my next short film, which was great. But then that festival, excuse me, that festival was in October of last year, and that had to be a premiere for that festival. It had to be the first time it's screened. So I started submitting to film festivals after that film festival, and so I'm probably done submitting now because I've had the chance to, like, at this point every film festival has opened up their submission portal. So after the last film festival that I have submitted to that I may get into in September, I'm going to make a decision then. But there's a chance that, well, what's definitely happening is that the series, is that the Capitalist is being developed into an episodic series. Whether or not I'll get the chance to produce this, I don't know. It's going to have to be at a much higher production level than I'm able to afford, especially with it being 8 to 10 episodes long of like an hour each. I don't have the capital to do that. And so this is going to have to be a situation where somebody picks this up. A network has to pick this up, which is possible. And so if that happens, this material may not be released, because it may be, I may end up shooting more of the, well, or it may not be released for a while because it becomes part of something bigger. Or I might go in a different direction and then just, put this one on my YouTube channel again, because YouTube has served me well. Like, I don't need to try to collect money from consumers when I like building up a reputation and seeing the money come back in other ways. So maybe this film will be out around Christmas. Maybe I'll have a deal with 50 Cent, who just opened up a film studio in Shreveport, and I'll be like, just wait a couple of years because we're gonna get a lot of poker talk in this one now that I have some real estate to work with. So, but yeah, I'll keep you posted for sure. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, it's really exciting. Can't wait to see it in its finished form. And yeah, the last question I had, you kind of referred to, which was your creation and involvement in the Black Film Festival of New Orleans, which is really a great achievement. I think it speaks to your commitment to community. I mean, you're really involved in the community, film community, New Orleans community. So yeah, I was just wondering if you wanted to shout that out when the next one will be, and anything you want to mention so that folks can head over there when it's happening.
For sure. So the next one is going to be August 19th through September 2nd. It's a 2-week total event. The first week is in-person events. The second week is virtual. So even if you don't come out to anything, you can watch all of the movies for free, streaming into your home. But if you're in New Orleans, or even if you're not in New Orleans, I suggest you come out to the festival events. It's a film festival at its core, but I know New Orleans, and I know that you have to incentivize people in the right ways. So there's plenty of music. There's music every day, live concerts with live music bands. There's comedy, there's poetry. And so, each of the days has like its own kind of set of events. And then there's always film related. Some of the films are New Orleans related films. I'm doing a competition this year. It's called the Nola 7 for any filmmakers who are any filmmakers out there, from other places too. There's an event called the 48-hour Film Fest, and you get a weekend to make a film, and then you get to have your film in competition against everybody else who had, they give you prompts to make sure that your movie is made for this festival. So like use the name Ben Saxton, and you have a location of a poker room. Like you have to integrate those things so that they know that this film was made for this. I'm doing one, it's called the 7 Nola. It's a week-long festival, and it's going to be, you can submit for free, and the winners are going to get money. It's not going to be a lot this year. It's going to be $2,500 in cash and prizes that will be given out. The big winner will get like 1,000, and then it'll pay 7 places. But it's more money than you would get otherwise. So hey, so that part of it is going to be something I'm really going to promote very heavily. And then again, each of the films, film days has their own kind of like thing to it. So some days it'll be New Orleans films in particular. Some days it'll be the films from people all around the diaspora who are coming to New Orleans to have an opportunity to screen their films to a new audience. And again, it's all for free. It's wide open. You can find out more at my festival page, www.bffno.com. That's the acronym for Black Film Festival New Orleans, BFFNO. And so you can check in there. We have an Instagram page with a bunch of pictures and stuff like that. And it really is like a good time for everybody. The movies, for the most part, are relatively family friendly, and so is the entertainment. So you just walk in, have a good time. Some of the days I'm buying a round of drinks too. I won't say which because I don't need everybody coming on that day. But if I see you, and I know you, I'll probably buy you a drink at the film festival too. So definitely come check that out. That's been it's been a really rewarding experience for me as somebody who, when I started in film, was having to submit to film festivals that I was underwhelmed by. And with a background in community organization, and again with a gambling spirit, I was like, I could do this. Like I'm just looking at what everybody else is doing. I'm like, this feels like they're giving me the bare minimum. And as a filmmaker who invested time, resources, and care into this film, I don't feel like my film is getting the reception it deserves. I know I can do better than this just by the level of care I can put into an event. And I started it, and it's been going pretty good. It's growing every year. We're going to be in our 6th year this started in 2018. So this is our 7th festival. We've done one each year. This is our 7th festival, and yeah, really excited about what's going to happen this year. So yep, come on now.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, we'll put the links in our show notes, and so folks can check out the schedule. And yeah, really exciting, and awesome that it's been going on. This will be the 7th year, it sounds like. So is there anything that we didn't talk about that you wanted to talk about, Gian? I feel like we've covered some ground here.
Man, what would I say? Shout out to all my poker people. I got a lot of love for the people in that poker room. My friends that I played OFC with, Baby Tang, Sean, Vince, even though he's not at Harrah's anymore, Mark, all those other guys who would sit in, all of my poker buddies I used to play with, Fred used to play with at the 4-8 game a lot. I don't know, he left us. I guess he went to Boomtown. He lives on the West Bank, so he got tired of us. Poker Floors, Tom, Ricky, other Ricky. Yeah, shout out to all my Harris people, man. Love y'all. Y'all have definitely made my poker journey a memorable one, and I hope to get everybody in at least one movie down the line. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for taking the time, Gian. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me, man. This was fun. Appreciate it.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank
All
you.
right.
I definitely enjoyed it. It was a fun conversation.
Thank you,
See
brother.
you guys.
All right. Talk soon.
Take care. All right.